Boom. And we're live. The Joe Rogan intro, that is, isn't it? What am I doing? Copying people now. Hi, everybody. I've gone live a little bit earlier. I'm going to cover this debate between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, which is going to be live. It's live at the moment. It's like the pre-show that they're doing, but I'm not going to be showing that. It starts in about 18 minutes, but there's a really big story at the moment that's happened that I want to show you. Hey, horror fan. He needs to bring up the NHS. Sorry, Blind Fury XXX says Corbyn should bring up Assange and freedom of the press under threat from Tory party. Here. I believe he should too, but he won't. Horror fan says he needs to bring up the NHS. Bojo's no show on Neil. Yes, he very much needs to do that and tie that into trust. Yes. And the Brexit document he used today, he needs to pin Boris to the wall. So the people in the chat at the moment who are just waiting for this debate to start tonight have said that Corbyn should bring up Assange. He won't do that. And then HorrorFan24 said Corbyn should bring up the NHS. Bojo's no show on Andrew Neil, of which he will, no doubt. And the Brexit document he used today, he will as well. But I think this might come up, horror fan. This is breaking news. Actually breaking news. In the last hour, I think. UK diplomat in charge of Brexit at the British Embassy in the US resigns over having to, quote, peddle half-truths. That's quite the headline, isn't it? It really is quite the headline. That's amazing. So I think it was the CNN. It was CNN I saw this on first. Senior British diplomat in US quits with tirade over Brexit half-truths. You've got to read this. I'm going to read it out to you. You've got to know all about this. A senior British diplomat in the US has quit with a blast at the UK government over Brexit, saying she could, quote, no longer, quote, peddle half-truths on behalf of political leaders she did not trust. Now, what you've got to understand is, so this is something that people are really, on the street, people like me, I suppose, don't really give too much thought to, of which really I should, because there are a lot of people working within the government who are there and they have been there a long time and they're not evil. They're actually really good people. They're usually quite upper class people that come from a certain background, but they're tireless. And there are, much like any other cross-section of society, there are good, mostly majority good, and then there are some bad. And obviously, the job of a civil servant in our government is to remain neutral. No matter what's going on, you've got to remain neutral. And historically, they have done a very, very good job of remaining neutral. And they are generally, though, upper-class people. And I say that with a smile on my face because this woman's name, this diplomat's name is Alexandra Hall. So, okay, she loved her name that much. I know I'm going to name, I like Hall. I'm going to name it twice. I'm going to call myself Hall twice. It's such a good name. Be like me saying, I like Dimmack. I'm going to call myself Gordon Dimmack. Posh, doesn't it? I could go and get the papers. In a searing resignation letter, this article from CNN continued, delivered just over a week before the UK general election, Alexandra Hall. When I first read it, I thought, CNN, you keep making a grammatical error here. My God, her name really is Hall. Alexandra Hall, the lead envoy for Brexit in the British Embassy in Washington. I'll repeat that. The lead envoy for Brexit in the British Embassy in Washington, in America, said that she had become increasingly dismayed by the demands placed on the British civil service to deliver messages on Brexit which were not fully honest. So they have to remain impartial, but historically people have bent the truth, etc. But it looks like she's saying, no, look, it's just, there's so much lies going on right now. Behind the scenes, we're working on things that you're not privy to. I don't know, but you can really look into this and just go, okay, there's red flags flying all over the place right now. And Jeremy Corbyn's not the one who's in government. He's not the one who's been doing all these policies. So whatever the problem is, that these people are running around with their hair on fire, they're obviously saying this is something that we've got at the moment. It's obviously something to do with Brexit as well, as you'll find out. This is where CNN go anyway. The reluctance of Britain's leaders to play straight with the public on Brexit. The reluctance of Britain's leaders to play straight with the public on Brexit, Hall said, had undermined the credibility of UK diplomats abroad. Her position had come, quote, unbearable personally and untenable professionally, she wrote in the letter, which is being obtained by CNN. There she is. She doesn't look upper class at all, does she? What? Hall's decision to quit and her no-bolds-barred resignation letter comes at a moment of deep political sensitivity for the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who is seeking re-election on the promise that he can get Brexit done. And as I'm recording this video, is due to appear on stage on the BBC in a live debate with Jeremy Corbyn, who just might be bringing this up. I know I would if I was him in that position. Johnson has been ahead in opinion polls, which we shouldn't believe, everybody. Opinion polls are there to influence decision, not to inform it. Johnson has been ahead in opinion polls, CNN say, but as his lead has narrowed in recent days, officials are nervous about anything that could undermine his chances of winning a parliamentary majority for his Conservative Party in the election next Thursday. An official at the Foreign Office, who was not authorised to brief the press, said it anyway, confirmed that Hall had resigned but had not seen the letter. Yeah, mate. Yeah. She's gone. I haven't seen the letter, mate. Nah. An official. It's probably the janitor now in CNN. A Foreign Office spokesperson said, quote, we won't comment on the detail of an individual's resignation, Downing Street referred CNN to the Foreign Office. In her resignation letter addressed to Deputy Ambassador Michael Tathan, in which Hall shared widely with colleagues in the diplomatic service, she said that her departure had nothing to do with being, quote, for or against Brexit per se, but instead was an expression of frustration about how the policy was being carried out. Is she saying here, listen, we're going to sell off the NHS? This is where I think Jeremy Corbyn might go here, on this debate that's coming up. Hall, a 33-year veteran of the UK Foreign Service and the former ambassador to Georgia, said UK institutions had been undermined and the reputation of British democracy abroad had been imperiled. Of course it has. You know, they look at Brexit, people abroad, and just go, well, people voted for something and you obviously don't want to do it. You obviously don't want to do it. You're stopping in the way of it. I've seen Australian Sky News broadcasts where they basically say, yeah, mate, the Poms just don't want to get Brexit done. Yeah, that's a terrible Australian accent, I know, but you see what I mean. I have been increasingly dismayed by the way in which our political leaders have tried to deliver Brexit with reluctance to address honestly, even with our own citizens, the challenges and trade-offs which Brexit involves, the use of misleading or disingenuous arguments about the implications of the various options before us. She's talking about the NHS. I'm sure this is where Corbyn will go with it. And some behaviour towards our institutions, which, were it happening in another country, we would almost certainly as diplomats have received instructions to register our concern, she wrote in her letter. This is serious. And I tell you what, how long is it, guys? How long is it before diplomat Alexandra Hall is outed by the Telegraph as a Russian agent? How long before the Telegraph say, Yeah, this Alexander Hall. Her actions are distinctly Russian. You don't know what's coming to you, Alexander Hall. Much of the blame for the strategy has been pinned on Johnson's lead advisor, Dominic Cummings, who ran the Vote Leave campaign in the Brexit referendum of 2016 and is credited with creating the Take Back Control slogan. Cummings has been unrepentant over his tactics. Yeah. He said, get out and speak to voters. Get out and speak to people outside of London who aren't rich about Brexit. Boris Johnson did today. He had to cancel a stump speech because 5 protesters turned up. But Hall, this article continues, made clear in her letter that she was not motivated to step down by any personal convictions over the outcome of Brexit, and that she had enthusiastically accepted the position as Brexit counsellor at the Washington Embassy in 2018. Quote, I took this position with a sincere commitment, indeed passion to do my part, to do the very best of my abilities, to help achieve a successful outcome on Brexit, she wrote in her resignation letter. Her complaints have echoes of the discontent of some diplomats in the US Foreign Service under US President Donald Trump. Since he was elected, scores of diplomats have left the State Department and senior roles have been left unfilled. Hall's resignation is a sign that under Johnson, there is similar unease. As UK Brexit counsel, Hall was tasked with explaining Britain's approach to leaving the European Union to US lawmakers and policymakers on Capitol Hill and in the White House. She suggested that her diplomatic role, intended to be politically neutral, was co-opted to deliver messages that were, quote, neither fully honest nor politically impartial. Probably fear-mongering Corbyn, I would have thought. Hall said that she had filed a formal complaint about being asked to convey overtly partisan language on Brexit in Washington. Hall said she was resigning now rather than after the election so that her decision could not be portrayed as a reaction to the result. She is expected to leave the embassy next week and is quitting the diplomatic service completely. Each person has to find their own level of comfort with the situation, she wrote in her letter. Since I have no other element to my job except Brexit, I find my position has become unbearable personally and untenable professionally. Attempts by CNN to reach Hall for further comment were unsuccessful. So there you go. The Brexit secretary, or the Brexit diplomat to Washington, has resigned. I wonder what old Auntie Beeb is saying about this. Which is diplomat resigns over Brexit half-truth. Yeah, I mean, they didn't mess about, the BBC didn't. They didn't mess about at all. That's a proper headline. That's a proper headline. They usually sugarcoat things like this that are embarrassing to to Britain and the UK and their allies, like Israel. Can't mention that. Demonetised. So there you go. A diplomat has resigned because, yeah, she's basically saying, yeah, Boris Johnson and his cronies are trying to get me to lie to everybody. That really does, that should give you pause for thought, shouldn't it? As to how broken our democracy truly is. Yeah. Thanks very much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell below so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. And support independent media. Make all world fiction again. Alright, I'll cut that there. Let's get on with this pile of crap. Now, I don't know about you, everybody. But if I'm going to get through this, I'm going to need a drink. I'm probably going to need something stronger, to be honest. Hi, everybody in the chat. Hi, everybody. It's just, Ellie, can you get up there, please, and stop bothering me? That's it. Lie down. She wants to be on camera, I think my dog does. Let's get some sound then.
Numbers on social media.
No, it's not started yet. We won't get some sound. Can we make me a little bit bigger? Always. All right. Yeah, that's a good point. Somebody's just, I think somebody's chat. Going to give this a retweet. Go to him. tweet my stuff out. Hi everybody, yeah, it's the debate, everyone, and I think that video that I've just cut there that I'll drop later, I think that is probably going to come up. I know if I was Jeremy Corbyn, I would be making a big deal about that. A big deal about that. I know Alexander Hall. Alexander Hall. Gonna go and get the papers. Get the paper tweet. So she's a true patriot by the look of it. She's a true patriot. I'm a Yank. I'm already drinking, says Robert Hickey. Good. I have a bong if you want, Gordon. Don't you worry about me, Kato. Don't you? I haven't had a drink yet. Right. I shall turn the volume up on this in the next minute or two, and then I shall go off and get myself a drink, because that's honestly the only way I'm going to be able to stomach watching this, I'm sure, with some of the lies and the dodges that we're going to see in this debacle that you're about to see. And that's just the presenter. That's without the politicians. So, right, let's turn it up for you, because I know they'll be coming on live, I think, in the next 2 minutes.
Difference on the number of seats that they win, and of course the polls are just a snapshot,
yeah.
And it's hard.
Once, twice, three times burnt.
Yeah, exactly.
Explain to people at home who don't understand what a spin room is, because it's quite interesting, isn't it? How does it work?
So the most important thing is, through that door there, I don't know if you can see where it says Studio 2,
yeah.
That is the actual studio where they're doing the debate. So if you want to put your ear to it, maybe you'll hear it. And then you've got all these journalists, like all these backs to us here are journalists from newspapers, websites, other broadcasters. Some of the people who are slightly better dressed, I might say, hanging around the side.
Yeah. I see Tom Brake here from the Liberal Democrats behind me.
Spinners from
sipping his tea,
spinners from the
ready
parties.
to impart his advice.
And of course, what's different about this one is it's just a double header. So actually, people from the other parties will not be here saying that their person did best, because their person isn't represented. They'll be just trying to just get their viewpoints in. The main thing that people always talk about is the Wi-Fi good enough, and what's the catering. And what you can't see is there's an American-style diner
like
around
Back
the
to
corner,
the Future
and that's where the catering is this time.
And what's going on in the changing room? You've got the two camps. I mean, we've got one heavyweight contest this weekend, haven't we, in Saudi Arabia? But this is, I like to think of this as a heavyweight contest, and the trainers are in there. What are they saying to their men?
I always remember, my favourite spin room story is from the big BBC debate at the end of the EU referendum campaign in 2016.
His favourite spin room story? Did that guy just say that? My favourite spin room story. God, some people are so lame. That's not even a one time at band camp, is it? My favourite spin room story. So this hasn't started yet. Let's go into the chat and say hello to everybody. Evie, hi Evie. I think that's how you pronounce YVIY. Evie1. George Galloway just announced he is going to form a new political party at his talk in West Bromwich. Good luck to George Galloway. Jonathan Pye made a great video today. I know people are mixed on him, so Sir Michael Hunt. Hi, Mike. He's been good in the past. He's very safe. What he does is very safe. Very safe. But he's very good. Please don't grovel over bogus anti-Semitism charges, Jeremy, says Harvey Burgess. Here.
The moderator to make sure that it all goes smoothly.
Right,
so here we go.
Looks like this is
the
start.
debate. Stay tuned.
Two leaders who want to convince you that they deserve to be Prime Minister. Tonight, Boris Johnson, leader of the Conservative Party, and Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, go head to head in the BBC Prime Ministerial debate.
Taxpayer, your money. This is gone to this. It's your money, people. £154 per household. Gone to this. This is what it pays for. Let's hope the audience were as good as they were in Sheffield, shall we? Come on. Here's
Good
Woody
evening
Weir in
and
Sheffield.
welcome to Maidstone Studios in Kent. Have you made up your mind yet? Wherever you live, whoever you vote for, one of these two men will be Prime Minister in a week's time. Tonight
Nick.
for the next hour, Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn will debate the future of our country.
Who's operating the camera? A ballet dancer.
Now, neither
Did
Mr.
you
Johnson
see that?
nor
Where
Mr.
she's all
Corbyn
been-
know the
have been
questions that
between
they're going
them?
to face. They'll be posed by
Is it on a
members
drone?
of our audience here. They've been chosen by the pollsters, Savanta Comres.
100
invited people who support both of
independently
their parties
selected
and others who've
audience
yet to
members.
decide how to vote. People from all backgrounds.
No
people
Tory
from
shills
all
in here.
walks
No,
of
no,
life.
no. No members
They're
of
to ask their
Momentum.
questions, to listen to the answers,
should be.
to listen to the
There should
debate,
be.
not to cheer
To
on
cross-
a team, let alone to boo their opponents. My job then is to try and make sure that their questions do get answered and that this debate is as free and as fair as possible. So
Okay, drinking
apologies
game. Every time
if
Boris
I have
says,
to
"Get
interrupt
Brexit
you
done,"
occasionally,
dither
just to
and
make sure
delay,
this debate is fair,
oven ready.
and to make sure that we do make progress through all the questions we want to get through. Now, both leaders are going to make opening and closing statements. The order was decided by the toss of a coin. Jeremy Corbyn won the toss and elected to go first. Jeremy Corbyn, would you give us your opening statement, please?
Thank you. Labour is ambitious for our country and ambitious for you. I want to build a society where there is real opportunity for all, where everyone feels supported and secure, and where everybody has dignity in old age. There are now 4 million children living in poverty in our country. People can't get appointments to see their GP. Elderly people can't get the care they need. And millions of families are struggling to pay bills and make ends meet. They need an ambitious government on their side that will put money in their pockets, save our NHS, rebuild our public services, deliver free personal care for older people and free education for all. Yes, that does mean asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more in tax. A vote for Labour is a vote for hope, for real change, and for a country that works for the many, not just the few.
Mr. Corbyn, thank you. Mr. Johnson,
Okay.
would you like to make your opening statement, please?
On Thursday next week, this country reaches a turning point. We can get Brexit done, we can end the paralysis, we can transform our country with massive investments in health, 50,000 more nurses, more funding for every school, 20,000 more police. We can spread opportunity fairly with fantastic infrastructure, education and technology. And the only way to unleash the potential of this whole country is if we get a working majority Conservative government. Because the only possible alternative is another hung parliament, with Jeremy Corbyn and Nicola Sturgeon with an economic agenda that would take this country back decades, and 2 referendums, one on Scotland and a second toxic and divisive referendum on the EU. Let's give that nightmare a miss. Let's end the chaos, the deadlock. Let's get Brexit done with a one-nation Conservative government and take this country forwards.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get on with our
Back decades.
questions now. Almost no rules
No, I think
tonight.
just one.
Questions will be posed by the audience. Both men will get the chance to answer them and to debate
Just
their
one will do.
answers as well. Our first question tonight comes from John Purcell. John Purcell, please.
Well, the back decades, yeah, so like the end of the 70s.
Is Sir John
Just
Major's
reverse everything that
recent
neoliberalism broke.
intervention worrying to you, Mr. Johnson? And is Mr. Blair's recent intervention worrying to you, Mr. Corbyn? Will these interventions make any difference to the result of the general election, or are they just a couple of old has-beens?
So the questioner, Mr. Purcell, is referring to the
Well,
fact
no,
that
they're not a
both
couple
John
of old
Major,
has-beens. John Major's
your
old
former
has-been.
leader, and Tony Blair,
Tony
your
Blair's
former
war
leader,
criminal.
have suggested that voters should consider voting for other parties
Hague.
and not giving you the majority you seek. Boris Johnson, your answer to Mr. Purcell, please.
Well, Mr. Purcell, John, I have the utmost respect, of course, for all former Conservative leaders and don't wish to deprecate anybody as a has-been, but I don't think he's right. And we have a fantastic plan to get Brexit done. It's a deal that's ready to go. It's oven ready. We can get it done by Christmas, get it back into Parliament by Christmas, as we have
by the
a
time this
majority
thing's
Conservative
finished.
government. And unlike Mr. Major, I lead a party that is now totally united. All 630 plus Conservative candidates at this election actually back my deal. And
totally united because you got rid of anybody you didn't agree with.
We have a very, very broad spectrum of views in our party, but they all back our deal. Now, the mystery is what is the position of the leader of the opposition on this subject, because I've yet to hear what the deal is that he wants to achieve and whether he backs it himself.
Jeremy Corbyn, the question was, should you be
stream,
right
everybody,
about Tony Blair
like the
saying
stream,
to people,
like
don't
it,
necessarily
share it.
vote Labour?
The issue coming up on Thursday is the future of this country. Are we going to continue with this level of inequality, of poverty amongst our children, of underfunding of our schools and a threat to our National Health Service, and a no-deal Brexit, which the Prime Minister is threatening us with, or a trade deal with Donald Trump and the USA, which will damage our public services? A vote for Labour is a vote to end austerity. A vote for Labour is to invest in the future of this country. And so Tony Blair and John Major are welcome to make the comments that they do. I urge them to think for a moment at the reality of what 9 years of austerity has done to the people of this country.
Say it
to your party, Mr. Corbyn, that the most successful
why didn't you
Labour
just
Prime
say
Minister
nobody
in
cares
history
what Tony Blair
cannot
thinks?
back you
Why do I care
to
what a
move
war
into
criminal
number 10?
thinks? That's all he's going to do.
I am
Boom!
this election to win it on our manifesto.
Million
to win
extra
it on our
votes.
manifesto, which I believe
Honestly.
will bring real hope to those people that have been denied it during these years of austerity.
Isn't the
would
truth
lose
that
their
many
shit as
voters
well.
think there's an impossible choice? They don't want either of you in number 10 Downing Street.
Imagine
Well, I
if
hope
he
very
just
much
said
that people will vote for a one-nation Conservative government and get Brexit done. And I think, if you look at our agenda, it's positive, it's progressive, it will unite the country, involve massive investment in public services and take us forward.
Our government will empower people. Our government will not leave anybody behind. That is the whole principle, the golden thread that runs through our manifesto.
Well, let's turn to Brexit. It's already been raised many times already. And on this question, we're going to take two questions, one from a Leave voter, one from a Remain voter. So first of all, Yvonne Emerton, who voted Leave, please.
Brexit has taken up so much time already. People are really fed up. Can you guarantee that it will happen next year?
Can you guarantee it'll happen next year? And then Tom Clark.
The answer is no.
Remain.
The answer
How
is
would we
no.
be better off from the Brexit deal or a future Labour deal compared to what we already have as a member of the EU?
Thank you very much. Let's turn first to Yvonne Emerton's question. Can you guarantee that Brexit will happen next year? Jeremy Corbyn.
What I can guarantee is that we'll bring an end to this debate and we will have a final say for the people of this country. We cannot go on forever saying we represent the 48 or the 52. I want to lead a government that represents the whole country and the whole community. So we will, within 3 months, negotiate a Leave agreement with the European Union that will protect trade and jobs and the peace process in Northern Ireland, and put that alongside Remain in a referendum within 6 months. And that will be the end of the matter. My role as the leader of my party, as the Prime Minister, would be to ensure that decision is carried out, whatever it is. But nobody voted to lose their job or to lose trade with Europe. People voted for many, many reasons, but I think we've got to come together and bring this issue to an end, not go down the road of sweetheart deals with the USA.
Boris Johnson.
Well, I share the frustration of both our questions about the length of time it's taken to get Brexit done. And what we can do with the deal that we have is get it done by January the 31st and come out. And then to get to the question about the advantages, we can do such things as improve our standards for animal welfare, ban the live export
Thanks,
of animals.
Jamal.
We can cut VAT on tampons. We can do things to create free ports
Send me an
around
email,
the
mate.
country. There are all sorts
Seriously,
of ways
send me
in which
an
we
email.
can
It's been too
regulate
long.
differently and better. We can also, of course, control our immigration system for the first time in a long time. Now, what I haven't heard from the leader of the Labour Party is this deal that he thinks he can get in 3 months' time. Who is going to negotiate it? Because as far as I can see, everybody on the Labour front bench is campaigning to Remain, apart from Mr Corbyn, who is neutral on the matter. Who is going to secure this deal? How can you get a deal, a new deal from Brussels for Brexit, if you don't actually believe in it? That's the mystery that I failed to answer.
Jeremy Corbyn, how do you get a deal, he asks, if you don't really believe in it? And John McDonnell and Diane Abbott and Keir Starmer, all the rest, they say they're Remainers.
We get a deal in order to ensure that whatever the outcome of final vote, the trade relationship
They're
continues
both full
with
of
Europe.
shit on this.
If you go down the road, it'll take 7 years to negotiate a trade deal with the USA. You're going to have
People are
queues all up the
tired of this
M20
politics,
in Kent.
guys.
You're going to have a problem of supply
People
chain
want honesty.
to all of our manufacturing industries. You're going to have job losses on a huge scale.
Nonsense, he says. Why are you saying nonsense?
Unless you have a serious
Be
deal
honest,
with the EU
Corbyn.
to maintain that trade
Just be honest.
relationship.
We have a deal. It's a wonderful deal. We're coming out on January the 31st if we can get a working majority. And I'm afraid, listening to Mr. Corbyn, it's absolutely clear that what would happen next year is there'd be a period of negotiation about this mystery deal led by somebody in the Labour Party we can't yet identify, since Mr. Corbyn doesn't believe in the deal himself. It would then be put to another referendum to the people of this country. Parliament, our country, would spend a whole year more, probably more, locked in debate about Brexit, when what people want to do is move on and focus on the issues facing the people.
Jeremy Corbyn.
And that's what we can do immediately.
Absolute
Mr. Johnson will
bullshit.
spend at least
All
7
you want to
years
do is
negotiating
increase
with
your
the
majority
USA
up to
on
400,
access to our
420
public services,
seats,
on the price of medicines
maybe,
in Britain,
just to
on the
try and
access
get
to our
rammed
national
through
health
then
service.
to
And he
watered
knows
down
he
Theresa
can't
May
get a deal quickly
Brexit
with
deal
the
that's
USA
not
because
actually
of the
Brexit
way in
anyway.
which the US political system
That's the
works.
truth
And
of
so
it.
what he will do is
Because
walk
if
out
you
of a
went for a no
relationship with the
deal,
EU into
the
a
state wouldn't
relationship
let you,
with
as we have
nobody.
clearly
And that is where
seen.
the chaos will
That
come.
they will
Answer
only
that,
give
or
you a
shall I
Brexit
sensible
that's not
I'm afraid
Brexit.
that
So
shows
stop
a-
lying and
a slight
bullshitting to
ignorance
people.
of the reality, which is that as we leave the EU, we are
Look at
coming
he's
out
standing
with
up
our
there,
deal,
he's just
with a state
lying.
of perfect
Lying.
attendance, zero tariff, zero quota.
What
We'll
I
be able
just
to
said
begin
is the
not only
fucking
putting in our
truth.
Australian
That's
style
the
points-based
truth.
system for immigration, taking back
The
control
only
of
way
our
you're going to
laws,
get a
taking
Brexit,
back control
the
of
way
our money.
he's going to
Also
get a
being
He asked you
delivery
about trade then,
is
Mr. Johnson.
if he
not
gets
just with,
450
countries
20
around the world,
seats
but
and then
we will-
rams
we
through
will
a
do
watered down
fantastic
deal.
with the EU and with the US.
Can we be
and
clear,
many
Mr.
other
Johnson?
countries.
You
The
again
Theresa
and
May
again say the
play.
phrase,
How did
"Get
that work
Brexit
out?
done."
That's right.
But you
In
haven't done a
2017.
trade deal with the EU. You don't know you can do a trade
People
deal
saw
with the
through
EU.
it, didn't
You
they?
don't know there won't be no deal on trade with the EU, do you?
On the contrary, we have a fantastic deal. It is there, ready to go. And
Not
the
on
advantage-
trade, forgive me.
Don't
You
say
don't
over
have
ready, I'm
what
pissed.
what our deal allows is for British businesses of all kinds to have perfect confidence in the way we leave the EU, because we are in a state of equivalence with zero tariff, zero quota, exact regulatory framework, and we have ample time to get on and build a new free trade partnership, not just with the EU, but with countries
It's blah,
around the
blah.
world. And the great beauty of this deal is that it gets Brexit done, gets it out of
fuck
Parliament,
off!
stops the wrangling, stops the chaos, and moves us forward.
Thank you very much. Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn.
Boris Johnson is going to spend years negotiating with the USA. He's going to spend years ruining the fact he didn't reach a proper agreement with the EU before leaving. And as the documents we've shown today,
And this guy's not going to be
indicate
honest.
He hasn't been exactly
Ask him.
straightforward
Ask him.
on the issues.
Ask him how you're going to get a
surrounding
deal
trade with
without free
Northern
movement of
Ireland
people.
and the
Just
Republic
ask him.
of Ireland.
He won't answer
And
you.
so I do think we need a bit
Won't
of
answer you.
openness from
Why?
the government.
Because
we forced
he
them to
can't-
release
he-
the
what he
documents,
knows he
or
won't
we
be able to
released
get
them for them, actually.
his
A
customs
week
deal
ago, which showed the access
without
that the
accepting
US
free
were
movement of
demanding to our
people.
public
And that is going to be
services.
a red
today,
line in the sand
news
for a
came
lot
out
of
what's
people.
happening with Northern Ireland. And
So he's not being
For people
honest
who didn't hear the
either.
news, what are you claiming the document
So
showed?
for those
And
of
we'll
you who
put it in the
say that
show
I
quite
shout and
clearly
I say
that
I'm
there
too
are
hard
going
on
to
Jeremy
be
Corbyn, I'm just
charges,
calling
there
it the
are
way it
going to be
is.
customs
He's not
checks,
being
there are
honest
going to
here.
be restrictions on trade
You know he's
between
not.
Britain and Northern Ireland.
He's doing
Thank you
his
very much, Boris
best
Johnson.
Well,
under
actually, that is not
the political
true. The whole
pressures
of
that
the
he's having to
UK
work
comes
under. But
out,
this, people have had enough
England,
of that
Scotland,
shit.
Wales, Northern Ireland, together we do free
They want
trade deals
honesty.
together.
They want
Northern
somebody
Ireland
who's
is
just
part of
going
the
to give it
territory
the way
of
it is. This
of
is
the
why
UK,
Trump fucking
and
was
we are united.
elected.
And I have to say,
Populism.
I think it's a
what's
great
this
opportunity
document
for
This
our
is why
country.
he's
says
supposedly
unfettered access, I think
leading
is
in
what
the polls.
It says unfettered
UK
access, and
market.
also it
And that is-
questions the
and
question
that
the
is what we
fettering that will happen.
That is what we will
One
have.
at a time, please.
And that is, and what the document also says is that Northern Ireland is part of the customs territory of the UK. And, you know,
Isn't that the problem,
I have to
Mr.
say-
Johnson, that
I
the
have to say-
DUP, the unionists who were your partners, they agree with him and not you
Well, they
about
don't
it?
actually, because our deal is a great deal.
Which is the
Well, let me just
Conservative
make
and
one
Union
I do
Party.
find it slightly curious, to say the least, Nick, to be lectured about the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland by a man who all his life political life has campaigned to break up that union and actually supported for 4 decades the IRA in their campaign violently to destroy it. I must say I find it a
16
curiosity.
people who didn't know
What
we were clapping up there.
Showing a degree of honesty about
This is such an old smear. All Corbyn was doing was talking to the IRA, trying to get a peace deal in the open, whilst Margaret Thatcher and the Tories were doing the very same thing in secret behind everybody's back. He was just doing it in the open. So balls to you, Boris. That's just a smear.
To see a peace process in Northern Ireland, and that is exactly what we've got. And thank you to the Labour government that negotiated it after 1997.
Now, gentlemen, briefly.
One good thing that Tony
There
Blair
was a
did,
second question. I want to give you the chance. If you remember, let me just remind you. Tom Clark asked you, Mr. Johnson, how will we be better off from the Brexit deal or a future Labour deal compared to being in the EU?
Please. Thanks very much, Tom. And there will be all sorts of ways. I've mentioned the
gave the unionists the illusion of a union,
sanitary products, or regulate differently from bioscience, or have free ports in areas that need investment. You can trigger growth investments in some of the
illusion of their country was the same thing. It was the same. It just gave the illusion of everything. It was a trick.
We can't because of EU rules. Another major advantage is, of course, that we take back control of a lot of money that we'd otherwise send to the EU. But I might mention also our ability to control our immigration.
To those people who are like loads of people in the chat are asking me to talk a little less. Do you know what the channel is called? Just see below.
Thank you.
Democratically.
Jeremy Corbyn,
if you want to me to talk less, just go and watch it on the BBC.
Be better off from Brexit?
You can see it online.
You have your deal. Or indeed,
this is my channel.
And you go to a referendum and it passes and we do leave.
Because we will
I'm not going to apologise for talking on my channel.
Our manufacturing industries are able to continue trading. Over half of our trade is with Europe at the present time. Walk away from that. Put up a barrier on that, then you've got real problems for manufacturing industry jobs all across the country. Many jobs have already been lost because of the uncertainty surrounding all this. We have to deal with this within 6 months. The Prime Minister's suggestions of a trade deal with the USA, which will take at least, in their estimation, 7 years to negotiate, means 7 years of complete uncertainty and continued job losses in manufacturing industry.
Jeremy Corbyn, you've been asked by Boris Johnson, I want to give you the chance to ask why you won't say where you stand on Brexit. Is it that you don't know what you think about Brexit, or that you do know but you won't tell people?
It's because I think the country has to come together and cannot keep on negotiating and arguing with itself about 48 versus 52. It has to be an agreement we can reach with the EU that is credible and would maintain that trade relationship, but would be outside of EU membership or full membership of the EU. That is a way of bringing people together, and a government that implements that decision, whatever it is.
Very brief response.
You cannot end the uncertainty. You cannot end the uncertainty on Brexit if you don't know what the deal is that you want to do. I negotiated our deal. You cannot negotiate a deal if you're neutral.
You did exactly that.
Inconceivable. And I think it is
he did exactly the thing that he said you can't do.
Position on the
like a few weeks ago.
At the moment.
Thank you very much.
You cannot get a good deal for this country if you don't believe it. And I yet to understand how Mr. Corbyn proposes to negotiate a deal for Brexit.
Well, you put that to him, and he
said you can't say with certainty what deal you can until you've got the deal. Well, he was doing that a few weeks ago.
Faith Zalumis, please.
Thank you. I am returning to my nursing studies next April. It costs a lot to train as a nurse, but the starting salaries are low. How would you deal with the shortage of nurses and ensure the NHS can retain them?
So Faith, who is a student nurse, says, how would you deal with the shortage of nurses?
Education.
Ensure that the NHS can retain them. Boris Johnson.
Well, Faith, thank you very much for what you're doing, and I believe passionately we need more nurses in the NHS. I've been in the office for about 130 days, and everything I've seen convinces me this is now the time to invest massively in our NHS. So what we're doing is putting in the biggest cash boost, £34 billion more, 50,000 more nurses, and I should unpack that figure. People complain about it, but it means retaining the 19,000 who might otherwise drop out of the service, and then recruiting another 31,000 new nurses. Plus, we're bringing back the £5,000 bursary. One thing that we're doing that I think is sensible, and that our Australian-style points-based system allows us to do, is to encourage nurses from overseas to come to fill some of the gaps by shortening the time for their visa application. Now, what I think is totally incomprehensible is to have a system where you try to get more nurses and more staff into the NHS and simultaneously ask the whole of the public sector to work a 4-day week.
Thank you very much.
Bad for patients and bad for the NHS.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you.
Yeah, that'll mean they'll have to work 18 hours a day instead of
Saluma
16.
says, how would you deal with a shortage of nurses and
Rights
ensure the
abuses.
NHS can retain?
Well, there are 43,000 nurse vacancies at the present time. It was a Conservative government that cut the nurse bursary. It was a Conservative and Liberal Democrat coalition that increased student fees to £9,000 a year. And that is a major contributory factor to the stress levels that exist within our NHS.
They got rid of
it is
matrons.
at breaking point, it is at crisis point. Go to any A&E department and you'll see that straight away. So what we'd do is end university fees, which will mean more people go into studying. What we will do is return the nurse bursary, probably on a more generous scale than it was in the past, and we will recruit as rapidly as we possibly can. But crucially, we will fund the NHS properly. £40 billion in total will go into the NHS in order to fund it properly, and that has to be done. The Prime Minister, the day after he was appointed, announced there was going to be 40 new hospitals.
Yes.
A week later, that became 20. A bit later on, it became 6 new hospitals. He seems to have a problem with the figures about hospital building in Britain.
Perhaps I could elucidate.
Please.
Well, perhaps I could elucidate Mr. Corbyn, who has a problem with coming up with his Brexit policy. But the reality is that we have a very clear agenda, which is to upgrade 20 hospitals, to build 40 new ones. It's perfectly true that the cash allocation for the whole hospital build is for 6 initially, but we're putting in the seed funding now so that they can do the architect's drawings, do the plans, do all the business case, so that in 10 years' time, as a result of the decisions taken just in the last 130 days by this government, there will be 40 new hospitals in this country.
Well, what's wrong with that is 12 hours or 15 hours after being appointed Prime Minister, he came to Parliament and grandly announced there was 40 new hospitals. It turned out there weren't. That's when he was asked where they were going to be. But that was then reduced to 20, and then it became seed funding for 6. It's not credible to make those kind of statements and not be able to back it up with any serious plan.
Is it credible, Mr Corbyn, Mr Johnson asked you a second ago, is it credible to say you'll deal with nursing shortages while agreeing to a 4-day week, which will surely make the shortages worse?
What we have said is that we want to see the working week come down. The average working week across the country is 38 hours, and we achieve bringing it down by improved productivity in industries and services. There is no plan to bring in a 4-day week in the NHS, but there is a plan to properly invest in our NHS, because I am fed up. We're seeing people queuing and waiting and being in desperate straits trying to get an appointment to see a GP or to go into hospital.
And John McDonnell said very clearly that there was a plan for a 4-day working week, and it's not clear why Mr Corbyn has resiled from that tonight. But what I will say is that we will invest massively in the NHS. This is a new government. It's a very ambitious government. I want to see more funding going into our public services. We're levelling up funding of education in schools around the country, 20,000 more police. But we can only do that by having a strong economy. And the only way, the only way we can have a strong economy is if we move this country forward and get Brexit done. And I'll just remind you of one report that came out the other day. There is £150 billion worth of investment waiting to come into this country if we can get my deal across the line. Now, what would this country
Thank you, Mr Johnson.
That was not a single. That wasn't a triple.
Forgive me interrupting. I'm keeping a very close eye on the time, and you've had rather a lot, Mr Johnson. Corbyn needs to catch up.
That the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats passed a Health and Social Care Act after 2010, and that has led to £10 billion of private sector involvement in the NHS, with often different wage structures and a difficulty in management. Labour will end privatisation with the NHS and return it to what it was always intended to be, a fully funded, fully functioning public health service in this country.
You will end privatisation, you say? Are you still claiming that the NHS is up for sale? Because your document doesn't seem to show any such thing.
Well, read the documents that were discussed in secret, and the government refused to release them, between themselves and the US administration, about access to public services and the extension of the life of patents on medicines, which would increase medicine costs in this country. President Trump has said many times people pay too little for US medicines around the world. That's the kind of agenda the Prime Minister wants to get involved with. That's the kind of deal they're trying to make with the USA.
Boris Johnson, he says you want to sell the NHS.
I have to say, this is pure Bermuda Triangle stuff. We've heard it time and time
Well,
again.
your diplomat just
from the
resigned.
Labour Party during this election campaign.
It's with that,
We'll be hearing about Little Green Men next. I believe very passionately in I use the NHS. I love it. It's one of the most incredible things about this country. It is admired around the world. The central idea that if any of us get sick, all of us take care of them. It's a fantastic thing. Now, we believe in an NHS free at the point of use, and under no circumstances will we sell it off to anybody in any kind of a trade deal. I would just remind.
You don't dispute, though, do you, Mr. Johnson? You don't dispute what he's quoted, which is that American trade negotiators say they want more access to the NHS.
And I've made it absolutely clear to everybody that under no circumstances will that happen. And the biggest privatisation of the NHS, of course, took place under the last Labour government, under the last Labour government, which put in the ruinous PFI system. And I've gone round many hospitals talking to fantastic staff and management there who are bearing the burden of that debt.
Jeremy Corbyn.
We will now have to deal with it.
I just remind you that your party opposed the formation of the NHS in the first place.
Well, you're now going back to 1940. And I know that you have a long memory in politics.
It is factually so.
I mean, you're quite right.
It is factually so, but the more important thing is that your party has presided over cuts in our NHS, increased waiting times and waiting lists, record number of people delayed in getting appointments, and a social care system that is in crisis.
And there are
it is time.
more nurses now than there were under the Labour Party, and that's because we've had a strong economy that's enabled us to make investments, and we are now going to step those investments up, because we believe passionately in the NHS. And the way to take this country forward, the way to get it moving, is to get rid of the blockade in Parliament, get Brexit done, and move on.
There are 43,000
one nation majority Conservative government.
Let me just ask you, Mr. Corbyn.
There are 43,000 nurse vacancies. That's the fact.
Understood. Now, you sent an email on behalf of the Labour Party saying, imagine opening a 5-figure bill for your cancer treatment. Do you accept that that is totally misleading?
I thought
there
that
is no
would,
possibility of anybody having NHS cancer treatment and having to pay a 5-figure
If you end up with a privatised service, that's what you get. If you end up with that US trade deal, that is what you get. Now, the Prime Minister says he's not going to do that sort of a trade deal. If that's the case, why did the talks go on for 2 years? It doesn't take 2 years to say no to privatisation of the NHS.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. We've got lots and lots of questions to get through. I want to give you the chance to move on. Now, because we've had lots of questions, one or two we're going to make rather quicker than the rest. I'll come to one of those in just a second. You can join in this debate, of course. Hashtag BBC Debate on social media. And before we return to one of our longer questions, we've got an interesting question here from Phil Wason, who has written in, can't be here tonight. Which has the better track record of raising the standards, the living standards of the poor, socialism or capitalism? Jeremy Corbyn.
Socialism carried out in a democratic way in this country, in Scandinavia and other places, has raised the living standards of the very poorest. And it was the post-war Labour government that did massively to improve the living standards of the poorest working class communities in this country. And our Labour government will do the same again.
And I would say that it is one nation conservatism, which understands the vital importance of a dynamic market economy as the only way in which you can pay for fantastic public services and for giving and for looking after the poorest and neediest in our society. That is the balance and symmetry at the heart of what I'm trying to achieve with this government. And I think that to attack capitalism, as Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell do, is absolutely senseless. And by the way, to continue to attack all free trade is, I also think, I think ignorant of the fact.
Just to be clear, Mr. Johnson, do you think he wants to destroy capitalism? Do you? Is that your view?
John MacDonald, who is the Shadow Chancellor, and some would say the intellectual driving force behind this type of paleo socialism, is committed, he says, to fomenting the overthrow of capitalism. I think that is a mistake. I don't think that's the right way forward for our country. I believe in supporting businesses. I believe in cutting business rates.
My kind of socialism is one where you don't
forward.
leave people behind. You don't ignore the fact that 4 million of our children are living in poverty. You don't ignore the fact that there are thousands of people sleeping on the streets of this country. The fifth richest country in the world. The inequality has got worse. 150 billionaires in Britain, more people poor than ever.
Jeremy
That
Corbyn,
cannot
thank
be
you.
right.
We're going to turn on to a broader question. We're moving on to a broader question about
kicking his
economy,
ass
so
here,
both
isn't he?
of the leaders will have the chance to talk at greater length. Andrew Brooke has our next question. Andrew Brooke, please.
Drinking most of the time that Boris
Both
Johnson's
you say
been
that
speaking.
if you're asked to
but
form a government next
sound
week,
bites and
you will
slogans is not going to...
spend, making your plans, your expenditure plans, that is, seem like a fantasy. How are we really going to pay for everything that you are promising?
Correct
Andrew Brooke,
answer
thank you
is
very much
modern
indeed.
monetary
Spend.
theory.
He says
They
you're
always
both
have
going
enough
to do,
money
gentlemen. He wants to
for
know
war.
how both of you are going
That's
to
the correct
pay,
answer.
or
Neither
rather
of them
how
will
we're
get it
going to
right.
pay for your
Go.
plans. Boris Johnson.
Andrew, thank you very much. And we will certainly be making some big investments in, as I say, in the NHS, in putting more police on the streets,
you won't.
in lifting up our education funding
You
for every school
privatising
in the
everything.
country. And we're going to continue with that. But what we won't do is borrow hugely to fund day-to-day investment. And that is the mistake that the Labour Party would make. They would rack up our debts. They would put up spending to 1.2 trillion. To answer your question, what that would mean
Debt's tripled
is a
in the
tax
last 3 years
of
under his government.
£2,400 per taxpayer.
Tripled.
And you know, you hear
Gone from
from
like
Labour
600 to
sometimes that,
1.7
the
trillion.
burden is, I think Mr. Corbyn said it just now. The burden is going to fall only on the 150 billionaires or the top 5%. Actually, people on as little as £20,000 a year under their plans will be paying £1,000 a year more in tax.
Jeremy Corbyn, he says the people who are not rich will pay for your plans.
We're very clear about that, and we are the only party that's produced a fully costed manifesto with a grey book that adds up to every piece of expenditure we want. The problem with this country is we've gone too far down the road of free market economics. We've created too much inequality, and if every single bit of our manifesto was carried out tomorrow, we would just about reach the level of the public services of France or Germany. That is how far backwards we've gone. There has to be investment in our schools. Why are so many children in oversized classes? Why are so many children growing up in insecure housing because there isn't the sufficiency of council housing available? Why are there so many people waiting for social care? Why do so many people in middle age have to go into debt to pay for their kids to go through university and the social care that their older parents need? It's simply time to invest in our future.
Thank you, Boris Johnson.
And I agree. And I agree, but the difference between Mr. Corbyn and myself is that his plans, and we, as I say, we will be making substantial investments within the fiscal headroom that we have, but whilst bearing down on our debt over the life of the Parliament. But what we won't do is rack up such debts that the markets demand a higher interest rate, and you end up with huge tax burdens falling on everybody else. Labour always ends their time in office with an economic crisis. Corbyn and McDonnell would start their time in office with an economic crisis.
Last 10 years, the richest 200
he
people
says
have
that
tripled
all
their
of
wealth.
us will pay more on our taxes, not just the rich. And independent think tanks like the Institute of Fiscal Studies agree. That's what they say.
They don't agree with that point, actually.
Clearly not true, they said, of your claim that only the top 5% of earners would pay more.
They questioned some aspects of our programme, and we're happy to discuss that with them. But we are the party that actually produced the funding of it. The Conservative Party have produced nothing in the way of how they're going to pay for anything they suggest they're doing other than tax cuts. It's very hard to see how you can expand services if you're cutting the income base of government in the first place.
It's a fair question.
More debt and money in the hole.
To deal with the
462 watching, 110
cut
likes.
taxes and pay for more.
Is that like?
Labour didn't produce the funding for
support
anything.
independent
I'm afraid
media.
It's the hard work of the British people.
Make all well fiction
and
again.
It's British companies, it's British businesses, large and small, that produce the funding that pays for our National Health Service and everything else. And we're a government that understands that if you're going to have a dynamic market economy, you cannot clobber them. You cannot clobber companies with the highest taxes in Europe, which is what Mr. Corbyn and the Labour Party would do. It would be entirely wrong for this country to go down the route that they are proposing.
I quoted the IFS at Mr. Corbyn. Let me quote them at you. He says, your prospectus, say the Institute of Fiscal Studies, top economic think tank, Your prospectus, they say, is not credible. They say you haven't said how you'll pay for social care, you haven't said how you'll pay for future tax. So it's not credible, they say.
Well,
of course it's not. They're just making it up.
It's there in the manifesto, and it's a great programme. And the one other advantage that we have, apart from not wrecking the economy and not having a fiscal meltdown, which is what Labour always do, putting up taxes for everybody, we would get our country moving forwards again by getting Brexit done. And the economic drag anchor of Brexit on this country should not be underestimated. It is stopping investment. It means that people are uncertain about making purchases, about taking on new jobs.
What
it is holding our
Conservative
economy
governments
back.
always do is look after the very richest within our society. They've done very, very well in the years of austerity, while it's communities all over the country that have paid for it with closed libraries, closed swimming pools, out-of-reach pricing on sports facilities, lack of housing, increased stress, increased mental health stress. We have to redress the imbalances within our society.
There's somebody on 20k
our tax proposals for
See what happens when you can't talk over
to raise
people.
it to 26% at the end of the first period of that Labour government, which would actually be lower than it was in 2010, lower than it is in France, lower than it is in the USA. What we're proposing is a serious set of plans in order to start redressing the imbalances within our society.
So Boris
and I
Johnson's-
think it's important to do that.
His claim is basically that Labour would just bring us into line with many countries around the world and Western Europe.
I think it's quite incredible that Mr Corbyn should claim that people on £20,000 a year are amongst the richest in society and therefore deserve to be clobbered by his tax increases. I think that is totally wrong. The burden of taxation always falls most heavily on those on modest and low incomes. That is what will happen if Labour are allowed to get in.
Mate,
If we
I'm
have
44 years old. I'm 45 years old.
Corbyn-Sturgeon
If there's one
coalition,
fucking thing
I'm
I
afraid it will
know
lead to
for
an
sure,
economic disaster.
it's this.
And worse still, it will lead to the political stalemate,
tax
the
the
frustration
poor
for business that
more
wants to get on.
than
The
Labour do.
uncertainty of not knowing what the position
And
on
you
Brexit
let
is.
the
And we still haven't
get
heard
away with
Mr.
less
Corbyn,
tax,
this
less
debate has now
tax,
been running for 35
a
years.
hell of a lot
whether
more
he's in
than
favour of the
Labour
deal
do.
that he was about to
These
do
two
and how
things
he
are
would negotiate.
absolute certainties.
You know what the business
You're-
organisations tell me is
He's
they
telling
can't
people
stand
black
the
isn't
uncertainty
white.
of this government. They can't
the
stand
contrary.
the idea of a no-deal exit. They want to make sure they're able to continue that trade and continue that just-in-time delivery system that is so important in manufacturing industry. And they are constantly concerned at the lack of understanding of how industry works from a Conservative government that claims to be in support of those industries.
What he said to you, Mr Corbyn, I want to give you the chance to answer it, is that businesses, even ones that were in favour of Remain, want certainty, they want clarity, they want to get it done. What's your answer to him?
With us, you will get
Robinson
a deal
just say it
which
now.
would be leave, but leave with a trade arrangement, or you get
he said get
Remain,
it done.
which will obviously carry on
naming
with the
it now.
current situation. But they would have the certainty of knowing what the trade relationship is, where the investment's going to come from, and where the market is for the goods that are made in this country. It's kind of important to know those things.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very briefly, very briefly.
I think it is important to know those things, but it's absolutely unclear what that deal would be, what Mr Corbyn proposes to leave. And
You
who
didn't know
in
what
his
yours
party
would be about
proposes to
3 weeks
campaign
ago.
for the deal he's going to
You've
do.
made that point very well earlier on. Let's turn to another question now, very important subject, given the events of recent days, the issue of security. And the question comes from
546
Richard
watching,
Bounstone.
142
Mr.
likes.
Bounstone.
Hit that like button. Really
Your
helps.
most
Independent
important
media.
responsibility if you become Prime Minister in a week's time will be to keep us safe. Given the terror attacks we've seen on the streets of London, are you prepared to put public safety ahead of human rights?
Jeremy Corbyn, will you put public safety ahead of human rights, Mr. Bounstone asks?
It's not an either-or. You obviously have to keep the public safe. You have to ensure that the police are there
that's
and
a
properly
right-wing-
funded.
that's
You
a
have to
real
ensure the prison system
authoritarian-
works and is
it's not right-wing,
effective,
it's
that the parole
authoritarian,
board
isn't it?
works and is effective, that the probation service works and is effective. You have to give people that security. You don't get security on the cheap. You have to invest in it. Human rights are our defence against autocracy and our defence
with their
against
horrific
abuse of power.
foreign policy.
There is no difference
Hit
between
him with
wanting
their
security
history.
and human rights. The two things are actually inextricably linked together.
Boris Johnson?
Yes, well,
Hit him with their human rights
I see
abuses
absolutely
abroad in
no
Yemen.
reason to compromise,
You missed open
people's,
shots there, Corbyn, man.
Human rights such as the the perpetrator of the atrocious
13 million
killings at
cholera.
London Bridge.
13 million.
But I do think that it was
Cholera.
extraordinary and wrong.
13 million
that he should be out
starvation,
on
nearly a
early
million cholera.
release and,
In Yemen.
automatic
Human rights, boom!
Release. And
Creating terrorists. Open goal, totally missed it.
Prime Minister, that we needed to campaign against
Totally missed
short
it.
sentences. I said in August that we should get rid of automatic early release, and I've been very, very sad to see this guy out on the streets, able to do what he did, and we have a bill waiting to go, stuck because of the blockade in Parliament. If we can get a working majority, we can get rid of automatic early release and make sure for serious sexual and violent offenders, and make sure that terrorists, people who are convicted of terrorist offences, serve their full sentence. I think that is what this country...
If you want an example of how the Overton window has shrunk in this country, look at that clip.
The idea that Boris Johnson
Nobody's saying, well, maybe we should stop the fucking wars abroad. None of them. Not even the anti-war guy.
And a judicial system in a proper way. You have to have a prison system that works. One day, pretty well all prisoners are going to come out at some point.
I'm drinking now out of choice.
But if you don't run a prison system that includes rehabilitation, and you don't have a proper assessment of people before they're given any form of early release and a proper review of those cases, then there's obviously a danger to all of us. And so what happened on the streets of London was utterly appalling. And I was very moved by what Jack Merritt's father said about what his son was
nearly
trying
forgot
to
his
do.
name there.
That he wanted a society where you did address the huge problems, where somebody committed awful acts like that. Yes, of course you must imprison them. Yes, of course you must try and rehabilitate them if you can. But there has to be a monitoring process to achieve that. We need the security on our streets. Security doesn't come on the cheap. And if you cut the number of police officers, cut the number of PCSOs, privatise the probation service, underfund all the other aspects of the criminal justice system...
your relationship, you're cozying up to Saudi Arabia.
Mr Johnson, will you deal first of all...
He's not hitting him with the knockout punches. He's just throwing jabs.
And in the end died for a society...
Throw a haymaker.
Where we do not lock up and throw away...
He's not doing it.
Where we focus on rehabilitation...
Just jabbing away. He's not going to do anything, Corbyn. You've got to come out swinging.
I have huge sympathy for Mr Merritt and the relatives, families of both victims, and it was an absolutely terrible thing. But I still think it's wrong that somebody like Usman Khan, who was sentenced to 21 years or 16 years plus 5 on licence, should have been out automatically on 8 years, after 8 years, when the judge, when he was first convicted, made it clear that he was a very serious jihadi and a risk to public safety. And under our government, under my government, of course, we won't want to be compromising people's human rights.
But this is a good guess.
Of course we won't.
I'm guessing the guy's got a Saudi background, hasn't he?
Safety first.
It was the courts that quashed that, wasn't it? It was the courts that quashed that.
Automatic early release in such cases is, I think, completely unreasonable, and we will get rid of it.
Could you address Mr Corbyn's point,
Interesting
though, that
in
you have
Wahhabism.
decimated the probation service, the prison service as well, many thousands fewer prison officers, and the probation service as well as police officers during the era of austerity.
But Nick, I mean, just on a small point of fact, I mean, there was no parole or probation involved in this. He was released automatically. But your point, and there was
just as Julian Assange should be.
Any
Boom,
parole or
hit him with
probation
that,
officer
Corbyn.
could do about that.
Talking
That was
about
the nature
people
of
who
the
were
sentence. But,
released automatically. You're
there is
releasing a
valid
terrorist
question.
automatically.
How now? We make
But
sure
not a
we have
journalist.
criminal justice system that protects
What's up with
everybody
that?
and delivers.
Do you think
justice.
Corbyn
And
will
we are
hit him
putting-
with
We need a
that?
round of agreement.
Hey,
maybe agree
Well,
on
we are
this.
putting a huge amount of cash into our criminal justice system. I do believe that it should run smoothly, and we're putting another 2.5 billion into our prison system.
Jeremy Corbyn.
You can only
We
do
have-
that if you have a strong economy.
We have seriously overcrowded prisons. We've lost a lot of prison officers. And when a prison is overcrowded and there's a shortage of officers, the first thing that goes is education. The next thing that goes is rehabilitation. The next thing that goes is medical support and so on. So you end up with a breeding ground for all the horrors of the future. If we go down that road, we all pay a
pretty good
price.
answer.
So I'm simply saying this. Let's invest in our prison system, invest in rehabilitation, invest crucially in a probation service that works. It was privatised by this government, and we're saying it should be completely in public ownership.
I just want to make sure you're answering a point he made. Mr. Johnson said to you, in this particular case, it was not about resource, it was not about the parole board or probation, he says. It was about sentences. And you're opposed to the change.
502 watching, 192 likes. Hit the
There
like
should be
button,
a
people.
review
Support independent
of,
media.
The individual prisoner before
Really helps.
release is countenanced. That, I think, is absolutely clear. And that's why I asked for a role for both the parole board as well as the probation service in this. Because, listen, what happened was unbelievably appalling. And therefore, we have to keep people safe and secure. But you don't do that by underinvesting in rehabilitation programmes as well for all prisoners.
Mr. Corbyn has
perfectly good answer. But the anti-war, the historically anti-war person has not mentioned their horrific foreign policy once so far in 46 minutes.
A secretary in the form of Diane Abbott, who has called for MI5 to be disbanded. Mr. Corbyn, with great respect to him,
somebody applauded that.
When you look at
I don't think he was going for that.
Of safety on public streets, knife crime, you have a Labour Party that is adamantly sceptical, opposed to stop and search, which I believe is an integral part of fighting crime on our streets. We're not only going to put 20,000 more officers on the streets of London, we're going to fight
because we took 22,000 off in the last decade.
In London, but we're going to back the police up.
Let's get
this is
your
from
response
the
to that.
government that cut the police force by such massive numbers, privatised our probation service, and got rid of all of our PCSO.
Those 20,000 people, they're community support officers.
You made the point about cuts. His point
we didn't tell you that. And they're volunteers.
Wants to. He claims, you tell us,
believe me in the election,
to lead to disband MI5.
Silly.
You've opposed
no plans
public
whatsoever to disband MI5 or any other part of the security services. There are plans to invest properly in our police and security services. And when you live and represent an area like mine, where somebody was murdered on the streets by a far-right terrorist attack on an individual, you realise how horrific that is for the community and how dangerous that is for all of us. Yes, we do need to invest in all of our services, and that will help to make us all a lot safer.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Let us move on now to Toby Mayhew, who has a question for us. Toby Mayhew, please.
From accusations of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in major parties to threats made against female MPs, what would you do to get the hate out of politics?
What would you do to get the hate out of politics?
A value truth
Toby
again.
Mayhew has, and he mentions Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and
Stick
the
to the
threat
truth.
against
How about
female
that for a
MPs.
start?
Boris Johnson, I'm going to ask both you leaders to address problems in your own parties to begin with. Of course, you may want to make points about other parties. So,
well,
address your own party's
a very important point, and everybody
make sure you
feels
throw
it
some
at the moment.
anti-Semitism jabs at
Rough
Corbyn
time
because
in
it seems to be
politics,
kicking your arse tonight.
Feeling at the
I
moment.
don't know whether you've
and,
noticed.
I think on prejudice, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, what we're doing in our party is having an independent inquiry into anybody who's guilty of any such offence, and they're out first bounce if they're guilty. I think when it comes to the protection, particularly of female MPs and of women in politics, it's vital that we give them the security that they need, and we're doing a huge amount in the House of Commons to deliver that. What we need to do is, we need to come together as a country. We've been going at this for too long. And that one of the things, and that this is, I'm afraid this is my key point tonight, the scratchiness of politics, the bitterness, the acrimony, is a function of our inability to get Brexit done.
Understood, but on this specific point of Islamophobia that we
can do it, and we will. And we can be out on January the 31st and end what I think is misery for the country.
On the specific point about Islamophobia, and then I'm going to turn to Mr. Corbyn on anti-Semitism, you say people come out at first bounce, but you have candidates who have retweeted Tommy Robinson talking about, quotes, Muslim paedophiles, and a former chair of the Conservative Party says we have a serious and deep problem with Islamophobia.
Yeah, sorry. Very, very quickly, with all those candidates have either apologised or are now subject to investigation. And you know, I don't want to unnecessarily draw comparisons
frame this pretty
the Labour
good.
Party, but I do think it extraordinary that in this election we've heard for the first time in history the chief rabbi say that he fears for his community in this country were Mr Corbyn to be elected. And I think it's a quite extraordinary state of affairs.
Jeremy Corbyn, it is extraordinary, isn't it, that the leader of a religious community has to warn people about you and your party?
Yeah, it is extraordinary.
Anti-Semitism is wrong and totally unacceptable in our society, in our parties, in our political life.
You're confirming the narrative,
in the history
Corbyn.
of the awful
Terrible
treatment of
way
the
to
Jewish
answer
people
that
in the
question.
19th century in Germany
It needs to
indicates
go back to
exactly
the Andrew
where
Neil
that kind of
thing.
language and that kind of racism leads us to. There is no
Disgusting.
place for it
Yeah.
whatsoever
Terrible,
anywhere in our
terrible
party
answer.
or our society.
Yes, I'm sure
and
you
there
believe
never
every
will be,
word of that,
as far as
Corbyn, but
I'm
that's a
concerned.
terrible answer we've heard
see,
time
what
and time again.
Jewish
You're
members of the Labour
confirming their
Party say
narrative.
is, if this
You're
was black or
confirming their
Asian
narrative.
people who are victims
You
of
have to say,
racism,
yes, it
you
is
would listen to
extraordinary.
them.
Just as
But when
it's
Jews say
extraordinary that
your
the Jewish
party
Labour
under your
movement, for
leadership
instance,
is
is
infected
quoted
with
in
anti-Jewish
newspapers all
hatred.
over.
You say, no,
Whereas
I know
to be a
better.
member of the Jewish Labour
I
movement,
don't know
you
better
don't
than
have to be
anybody. I
Jewish
listen to
or a
people
member
and
of
amend, if
Labour.
necessary,
It's
the
just
rules and
which
processes.
right-wingers
I'm the
who
leader that
fund something
introduced an
to
investigation process,
write
introduced a
headlines.
disciplinary process,
That's extraordinary
introduced a
as well.
process of
That's the way to
education,
answer that
introduced a
fucking
process for dealing
question.
with egregious cases, and yes,
Not
we have
confirm their
suspended
narrative.
or expelled
Who is
members where
seriously?
we
His
found them
advisors are
guilty
out of touch,
anti-Semitic behaviour,
out of
as
touch
indeed
to
other
what the
parties
man
have done
on the
same.
street
But there
and
are
the common
problems
man, somebody
of
from a
Islamophobia within
council
our
estate,
society also,
really
as you
wants.
quite rightly
Tell me
draw
I'm wrong
attention
in the
to.
chat.
And there are
Tell me I'm
problems of
wrong.
language that
If he
is
answers
used.
the
I
question
do
the way
not
I
ever
just
use
answered,
racist
what would he
language
think?
in
What
any
do
form
you think
to
it would
describe
say
anybody
to the people?
in this world or in our society?
Let's be
We
clear,
live
you're
in
saying
a
that
world
confirming the
where
narrative,
we treat
Corbyn.
people with respect.
You're saying that he does? I think he's clearly saying, Mr Johnson, if you want to reply, that he thinks you have used
I missed that, but let me respond by saying that I think that Mr Corbyn, I'm sure, is very well intentioned.
Unready?
But I think that in his handling of this particular issue, his
dithered and delayed.
unwillingness to take a stand, to stand up for Jewish people in the Labour Party, his unwillingness to protect them, to put an arm around them, is, in my view, a failure of leadership. You cannot be neutral on questions like this any more, in my view, than you can try to lead this country and be neutral on the issue of Brexit. And it is a failure to take a stand, to have a point of view that in the end will cost this country gravely and deeply. And I don't want to waste another year, next year and more, in vacillation and confusion about what sort of position Mr Corbyn is willing to take, what sort of leadership he's willing to...
A failure of leadership is when you use racist remarks to describe people in different countries or in our society. I will never do that, and my party will never do that.
Good answer.
Jeremy Corbyn, he makes a point that one way to take hate more generally out of politics, he argues, is to sort this Brexit row out because it's infecting our politics. Whatever your view is of it,
Brexit,
do you
of course,
disagree with that?
Of course there has to be a solution to it, but...
What's your solution?
Well, I've made that quite clear, actually. I'm not sure if you've been saying that. But the point is about the cohesion of the point is about the cohesion of our society. I hope the Prime Minister understands the hurt that people feel when they hear remarks and articles that he's written in the past. I hope he will regret those, and I hope he will understand the importance of all of us using respectful language of all faiths, all religions and all languages in what is a multicultural society, which I'm proud to live in.
Blah, blah, Corbyn. Blah,
Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a couple more questions that we want to get through if we've got time. Our next question is from Katrina Harradine, please. Katrina Harradine.
In the era of fake news, what punishment do you think is appropriate for elected politicians who lie during political campaigns?
What punishment is appropriate for elected politicians who lie during political campaigns? Boris Johnson.
30 seconds per lie with Gordon Dimmack.
They should be made to go on their knees through the chamber of the House of Commons, scourging themselves with copies of their offending documents which claim to prove one thing and actually prove something quite different.
Jeremy Corbyn?
I think it's important when people go into an election campaign, they put forward a policy of what they're going to do, they put forward a policy of how they're going to pay for it, and if they don't deliver, then there is a democratic process
Then we'd
to
just be
deal
kill
with
them.
that in the future. That is what democracy is about. It's about holding people to account and holding government to account in Parliament. And I want to see not a weaker but a stronger House of Commons in the future that holds our government to account to make sure we deliver on the promises of reducing poverty in Britain.
Thank you. Boris Johnson, does it worry you that a leading British diplomat has resigned today, saying that she would no longer want to peddle half-truths on behalf of a government I do not trust?
Well, I don't know who you're referring to, but what it shows to me
Alexander Hall.
is that we need to move on as a country, because there are plenty of people who are irreconcilably opposed to Brexit, and I think that actually what we should do is respect the will of the people. People talk about trust in politics. Look at the promises that were made repeatedly by Mr Corbyn, by all the other parties, that they would honour the referendum result. They're refusing to do it. Here we stand at this critical moment in our country's history. It's our chance on Thursday to honour our democracy and get Brexit.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
There has to be a test.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, Mr Corbyn,
There has to be a test on the statements made. And so when people paint slogans on the side of a bus that are totally unsustainable, perhaps it's time that we did have an independent monitoring of what goes on.
Brief response, Mr Johnson.
Well, actually, if you look at the numbers that we put on the side of us, look at the gross figure we pay to the EU, the number is going up. And it is one of the advantages of our deal that we will take back control of our money, our borders, our laws, our immigration system. It's very, very clear. It's there in black and white. After 55 minutes, we still do not know what Mr Corbyn's deal would be, and we still don't know whether he would back it.
We didn't know what yours would be 2 months ago.
The shadow cabinet he is proposing to deploy to negotiate that deal, but
Thank
not
you
a
very
single
much.
one of them.
He's not the Prime Minister
Thank you
negotiating a
very much
deal.
Now,
How?
that's all the time we've got for questions now. Each leader has got 30 seconds for their closing statement. Again, the order was decided by
That's
the toss
the
of
most
the coin.
pathetic
Boris
attack I've
Johnson
seen
chose
from him.
to go last, so can I ask Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party leader, to make your closing statement, Mr Corbyn?
People say that politics doesn't change anything, but it can.
People say
It was a radical Labour government that created our National Health Service and rebuilt Britain. Today, we must be ambitious on the same scale. The future really is ours to make together. We can tackle the climate emergency, end child poverty, and properly fund our National Health Service. On Thursday, you can choose hope and vote for real change.
Thank you, Mr Corbyn. Mr Johnson, your closing statement, please.
This Thursday, we can choose another hung parliament under Mr Corbyn and Nicola Sturgeon with 2 chaotic referendums, or else we can get Brexit done, get out of neutral, and get a parliament that works for you and on your priorities. The NHS, the cost of living, 20,000 more police, more cash for our schools. Let's get it done. Let's move on and vote Conservative on Thursday.
Thank you, Boris Johnson. Thank you, Jeremy Corbyn. Now, the debate is far from over. It's raging on social media, hashtag BBC Debate. It's starting now on 5 Live, where Stephen Nolan will take your calls. You can have your say
there
by
you go,
calling
people.
08085
There's the
909
BBC Brexit
693 on the BBC News channel. Christian Favour is just next door.
I try and remain as impartial as possible when I'm doing these things. I do think it's funny that people... We did have a lot of people watching there, so... People saying, stop talking on my own channel. Yeah, I think Jeremy Corbyn had a pretty decent night, but my criticism of him is always the same. He's not radical enough. He's not hitting with the haymakers. He's not hitting with the knockout punches. He's got an arsenal of weapons that he could be hitting Boris Johnson with that he's not. He's got the safety on, and no, those things he's not. And I need to know why. Why aren't you hitting him with those things that really could knock his campaign sideways? Make sure that you install your government of the many, not the few. Do you not want to be Prime Minister as much as you say you are? Or are you really just backed into a corner? I suspect it's the latter. But I just wish that the man, whenever I look at him, the reason I like Corbyn or the reason I liked him as a politician, the reason I warmed to him originally, was because he was somebody that did the morally right thing instead of what the politically correct thing was. Now he doesn't do that. Julian Assange is being tortured in Belmarsh prison right now, and the guy has said more words about Owen Jones getting in a scrap outside of a pub. So like I say, my criticism of him, it's always that he's not radical enough. And to those Labour supporters who keep having a go at me for attacking Corbyn, who else in this fucking country attacks him from the left? Think about that. With regards to Boris Johnson, you can see how he struggles. This is why he won't go on Andrew Neil. You can see how he struggles in setups like that, in interviews where there's anybody in the room with any authority that are asking him questions that he can't talk over. I'm sure you saw the Marr interview the weekend. It was just atrocious. He just bullied Marr. He just talks over him and over him and over him. People were having to go at Marr because of it. It's like, go and watch the Chomsky interview with Marr. Go and watch Chomsky say, no, I'm not saying you self-censor at all. I'm saying you are in the position you're in because of who you are and the way you think. Honestly, it heightened it in that interview. Boris Johnson bullied him in that interview. And he wouldn't be able to do that with Andrew Neil, and he couldn't do it tonight. And you can see, he resorted to sound bites and slogans. That's all he is. That's all he is. And you know what? I know the people of this country, and I speak to people a lot. They're past that. They can see through it now. They've seen it with Brexit. They've seen it. They've seen that this lot can't get anything sorted because it doesn't look like they want to. And I saw a historian at the Free the Truth event last week, amongst other great speakers. His name's Mark Curtis. It's on my channel, his speech. Go and check it out. And he remarked how this is a historian speaking. He remarked how he has never seen a propaganda campaign like this in the media against Corbyn since World War II. He hasn't seen the propaganda campaign to this level. Now, I do want to, before I finish the stream, I do want to say something. The BBC, when it comes to election time, now you're seeing what they can do. It's the same every year. They're with strict rules there. They have to be unbiased. They have to present it in their own words. And you can see the level. That was excellent, what they did there. What they put on, I thought it was excellent. The politicians, they fell down. I think Corbyn wasn't strong enough, and that's always my criticism of him, isn't it? But I criticise him from the left. I say he's not left enough. I say he's too weak. He needs to be stronger. He needs to stand up to the Blairites and his party more. He needs to stand up for the likes of Chris Williamson more. That's where I criticise him. I don't sling shit at him for the anti-Semitism smear like anybody else, but, you know, people are still attacking me for it. How dare you attack our hero? Listen, I'm going to vote for him in the upcoming election. I've seen it now, seen everything. I thought I'll wait until after the debate to announce it. There you go. I'm going to vote Labour. Even though my MP still, Emma Reynolds, has not replied to my email about Assange after replying to me with a load of bollocks. Because we can't have Boris Johnson carrying on the way like this, and we can't have this. We can't have this. This is a coup. A very British coup. And it needs to stop. And our best hope of stopping it is with the Corbyn government. And when he, hopefully, if he does get in, I am going to vote for him. I hope that Corbyn gets in. I probably will need the help of the SNP. But it is doable, for sure. He's our best hope of stopping this nonsense that we've seen with the Tories, with austerity and with the cuts to the NHS. It's not just the cuts. It's the... I watched a documentary, a film last week, The Great NHS Heist, by a great guy called Dr. Bob Gill, and he's documented along with the help of some great filmmakers and great activists. How the NHS has just been sold off piece by piece, you know, with PFIs and subcontracts and outsources and land grabs, or the selling off of land rather. I'm going to go into that more in depth coming up. But I honestly think that, you know what, if Corbyn isn't going to talk about Assange, if he isn't going to talk about Yemen, if he isn't going to talk about war, if he isn't going to talk about Britain's horrific foreign policy that are causing all these fucking terrorists, that are causing these terrorist interests, the terrorist incidents. You know, none of these terrorists are blowing up fucking Bangladesh, are they? None of these terrorists are blowing up, I don't know, fucking Copenhagen, or blowing up Reykjavik. Why? Because Iceland don't have a horrific fucking foreign policy. That's why. But if he's not going to talk about all that, the one thing that he can hit them on, that will hit home with a voter, is the NHS, because they are selling it off. And if we do get a Brexit and get Brexit done, drink. It does look like that's the price you've got to pay. Be careful what you wish for. Thanks very much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you click the bell so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. I'm sorry if I talk too much. I'm sorry. I didn't intend on getting drunk during that live stream, but he said get Brexit done a real lot. And I don't drink as much as I used to. You know what? The channel's called Gordon Dimmack. You could have watched it on the BBC. Would have only cost you £154 a year. Thanks very much, everybody who supports me. I can't do it without your help. Please make sure you like the video. If you haven't liked the video so far, please make sure you like it now. It really does help. Really helps with the Google algorithm. And I appreciate you all who do support me. A like and a share goes a long way. You're all awesome. Even the people who were telling me to shut up on my own channel during my own live stream. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. I love you all. I'll be back tomorrow. Take care.